Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
My name is Eric. Of course, I'm here with Michael.
Oh, hey.
And this is a double feature, so we have two movies that are going to be on the show today.
We have a pair of features. We're going to do The Last Man on Earth and Deliverance.
So it's kind of an isolation thing going on here today. Here in Chicago, we don't feel isolation a whole lot. Some of our listeners who may live off in, say, the mountains or the woods.
So this is for you. This is about you.
Yeah, this is our show about those people. We're going to spoil both of these films. So The Last Man on Earth, everyone has seen this movie, even if they haven't seen this movie, because there's also the Omega Man, and then there's that thing that Will Smith did as well. Deliverance, I don't know. I haven't seen Deliverance. I hadn't seen Deliverance.
Deliverance, it's kind of culty. I mean, it was popular when it came out in the 70s. The trickle down from the 70s to our generation has kind of been nauseatingly low. I don't think a whole lot of people have seen it since it coming out, aside from the people that are going out to look for, the iconic stuff that you see parodied all the time. Yeah,
usually you're a good gauge for if something has cult appeal, but when we're talking about the 70s, I have a feeling that 70s stuff more than the average person does. So that might be a little unfair.
Right.
Either way, we're going to spoil Deliverance, and goddamn are there spoilers in it. I would say that you're probably safe to listen to The Last Man on Earth, even if you haven't seen it, because, whatever. We're going to tell you about pretty much the one cool thing that it really does. And Deliverance, that's going to be a lengthy discussion, and you should probably just watch that fucking movie first.
Yep.
If you don't want to get spoiled, you can use the chapters. They're in QuickTime, iTunes, and some other stuff. I got an email today, actually, from somebody who has a Zune who thinks we make fun of Zune owners on the show. I'm pretty sure we make fun of Zune as a platform.
Yeah, I don't care. Zune owners are probably fine people.
Yeah, they listen to our show, so they must be great people. Either way, you can look in the lyrics section of your Zune, or I still don't know if Zunes have lyric sections either. Or you can use the chapters in the chapters menu of the AAC version of the show, which is probably the one you have, and skip the movie you haven't seen or don't want to hear us talk about. So first up is The Last Man on Earth, the Vincent Price 1964 Last Man on Earth. And so this is based on a book. This just seems to keep happening on our show where we run into the book movies.
The thing is that we do films.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate side effect of films is that apparently either filmmakers don't have any original ideas or studios don't want to see original ideas. Yeah. They want to see adaptations of books. And they want to see them 3 times, apparently.
It just seems like the job's already part of the way done for you. I mean, if you're going to do a movie, you have to write it down anyway, so why not just go to the book? And clearly there might be something there. But we do have to talk about the Richard Matheson book a little bit. He wrote part of The Last Man on Earth. He wrote part of the screenplay. And apparently, this is really funny to me, now here in the future, not back in the 60s. He was so unhappy with the final product that he took his name off it. So they credit Logan Swanson. He's sort of taking the Alan Smithy approach that we saw, what was that, back in Hellraiser?
Right, the 4th one, I think.
Of just totally removing your name. Although, to my knowledge, Logan Swanson is not. Maybe that's the writer side of Alan Smithy, I don't know. But what's funny about that is that this movie had 2 other chances. It was remade as The Omega Man, and then it was also made as I Am Legend.
Which is the title of the book.
Yes. And then there was a direct-to-DVD thing. I think it was called I Am the Omega Man, or I Am Omega is what it was called, which I haven't seen, but I've seen the other 2, and I think this is probably as good as it gets. I don't know that you can do better justice I think this is the closest adaptation, and probably the least offensive one. I mean, both of those other movies kind of shoot themselves in the foot with at least one other thing that they did. I guess I don't want to spoil the weird thing that each of the movies does. But, you can check out the book. We have that Audible thing.
Right.
It's bookshow.doublefeatureshow.com. And you can just grab the audiobook of that, and then everyone will be happy.
You can basically judge the film based on your knowledge of the book, which a lot of people seem to like to do. Also, fuck you if you do that.
Yeah, right. I'm going to base the movie on my knowledge of Vincent Price, and that will just make me happy. So through that URL, we have a thing where you can get the book for free, but most people have to pay for the book. What you don't have to pay for is the film. I think this is the second time we've ever done this, but this is a film that's in the public domain.
Right.
The last time we did that was probably that William Castle movie we did all the way back with Clue.
Oh, yeah, when we did that.
House on Haunted Hill.
That was another Vincent Price, too.
Yeah, it was. Maybe just Vincent Price movies are, I guess it's about that time, right?
I guess
all the
so.
Vincent Price stuff just starts slipping into the public domain. This is also probably the second Italian, I'm going to use air quotes here because I know you'll scoff at this, Italian horror movie. Come on, it's the 60s. It's kind of a horror film.
I wouldn't even say
There's
that I Am
zombies.
Legend is a horror. It's not zombies.
But all right, so Italian horror, let's call it a piece of Italian cinema.
Sure.
As we talked about way back on the Dario Argento, I shouldn't call it a Dario Argento episode, but we talked about Phenomena. We
Right.
talked about Creepers. And, a lot of that Italian stuff was completely dubbed. They didn't even record sound, at the time that they did it. But I guess we should shift into that zombie thing because it's not zombies, it's vampires.
Right.
But at the same time, it's not vampires, it's zombie. I mean, what's going on there?
Apparently, I guess it's a virus, so chalk one up for zombies.
Okay.
And the virus has spread to everybody through people being bitten, chalk 2 up to zombies.
Yeah.
And essentially, they bite you and suck your blood. That's one for vampires. But then there's a way to treat it so that you can become normal again. So I guess it's 2 for vampires and 2 for zombies.
All right, so we're at a head here. However, we know that the movie was made in 1964.
Oh, so that was before Mr. Romero kind of took his swing.
Now, I know this is going to appeal to your contrarian streak here. This was done before Night of the Living Dead. And the book, even before that, obviously. But a lot of people credit the original I Am Legend story as beginning the disease apocalypse. That's the crucial moment in looking back and seeing how we got today's zombies, or how we even got the Romero stuff.
Right.
Romero has famously come out and said, yeah, I think he uses the word steal when he talks about it. I stole the story from this little known thing called I Am Legend, and that's what I based Night of the Living Dead off of. So it's one of those reasons that although it's not technically zombies, a lot of people look back at this and say the kind of themes of isolation, of being the last man. That's always the fear of the zombie stuff,
Sure.
right? I mean, I guess the top fear is that you're going to die, but the second to last fear is that
You're
will
not
be
gonna
the
die?
last. Yeah, you will be the last fucking person. Everyone else will be wiped out by this stuff. And this was really a key piece of fiction that hit on that for the first time in sort of mainstream culture.
Mhm.
I could care fuck all about zombies, but what I do care about is Vincent Price. And this is maybe not one of my favorite Vincent Price films, but one of my favorite Vincent Price roles. It's a classic example of something that he's really good at and something you see him do in almost all of these movies. But this is about as straight-faced as he gets, almost to the point where it makes this a serious film.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about him before being in all this campy stuff where he plays it straight and everything around him is fucking... The Raven is always the one I remember, the Roger Corman one, where it's just so ridiculous. But you sort of feel in a lot of these movies that he's in on the joke. This is about the most straight-faced Vincent Price stuff you're ever going to get, to the point where there's really dramatic moments. I mean, you have the scene where he laughs for a long time until he breaks
watching
down.
the TV.
He breaks down into tears, and you're supposed to feel for the character. Although that scene is just always, I mean, my first exposure to Vincent Price was Michael Jackson's Thriller. So that laugh is that's the thing that makes me think Vincent Price right away. I associate those one-to-one. So every time I'm watching one of these movies and I get a chuckle out of him, I just wait for him to burst out in maniacal laughter.
Right.
And you don't get that a whole lot. But if you want a good, long, creepy Vincent Price laugh sample, this is the movie you go to.
Unfortunately, it's not supposed to be creepy.
No, it's not supposed to be creepy. It's supposed to be jovial, almost. And then it's supposed to turn to sadness. But it's creepy because it's Vincent Price.
Right.
What makes this one of my favorite Vincent Price roles is that the movie is set up basically almost to a fault, where all you're doing is hanging out with Vincent Price. That's all this movie is. If you do a Vincent Price marathon, you decide you're going to take your Saturday off from whatever the fuck you do, and you're just going to watch Vincent Price movies all day, it's kind of like you're hanging out with Vincent Price. You're going to spend a bunch of time watching all of these films and just kind of going through each role with him being the central thing you focus on. Vincent Price movies are just set up. They beg for a marathon. The Last Man on Earth is literally just Vincent Price walking around doing things.
A lot of the sets don't even get touched.
No,
it's
they
kind
don't
of like
at all.
they build sets just so that this man can walk through them.
Right.
And react to,
completely undisturbed.
It's either him reacting, it's a reaction to a flashback that happened there, or him reacting to what might have might be going on there. It's a lot of untouched sets that are kind of used as catalysts for this character to react.
So you go through that journey, and through most of the film, you aren't coming up against any other characters. There's nothing to pull Vincent Price away from his, one-on-one time with you, the viewer. What you also get, that's a little bit different from some of the other films, is this narrative voiceover. By the time we get to I Am Legend, I mean, that's the big thing I was curious about when this Will Smith vehicle was coming out. I was wondering, how is modern Hollywood, because that's what that movie was, right?
Right.
I mean, it's blockbuster. That's what most Will Smith movies are. They're blockbuster. How is modern Hollywood putting out a movie where there's only one guy? Well, how are they going to do that? And so they have a couple gimmicks, and, he makes jokes, and he talks to the dog, and the dog is really their out. That's how they get away with a lot of that stuff. Dog. And he goes through a little bit of, he's going crazy in the movie. He's talking to mannequins and stuff, and I actually like a lot of that. Here, it's just Vincent Price giving voiceover. He is explaining the tale unnecessarily. So there's no reason within the context of the story for him to explain the tale, because there's no one fucking around. There's no one anywhere. He is the last man on Earth. Who would he be telling the story to? But regardless, he is there for the narration, and that sets this up a little bit differently. It's almost more of an inner monologue. You're just hearing what's going on in his head. And I think that's all I want out of the last person alive.
Well, it's the story told. I mean, essentially, when you have one person left and you're making a film about it, you have to at least approach it with the air of nobody would know but this guy.
Yeah.
And so if that means you have to have him kind of narrate, kind of tell the story to an audience full of literally everyone else who isn't him.
Right.
Because if you're not Vincent Price,
you have no idea what
it was like.
Yeah. Which is the good purpose of any narrative story. I mean, that's exactly what you're looking for. So this question comes up anytime you deal with a scenario like this. What do you do in this situation? You, Michael Kester, are the last person on Earth. I mean, does your life, your day-to-day life, look a lot like his, or do you go somewhere else with that?
Okay, so the first thing that comes to mind, and it's probably because it's a really fucking hot day right now in the studio.
Yeah, I don't know why it's so warm in here.
Assuming the weather was nice, I'd probably go out a lot. I'd probably, go into stores. I would break windows. I would break a lot of windows to get in, because things would be locked or closed or whatever. I would watch a ton of movies. I would watch more fucking film.
Yeah.
And I would, go probably for the first week and do all the things that I couldn't do because I didn't have the money, I didn't have the time, I didn't have the resources, and now I can.
It would be a bigger version of your current life.
And then I'd get bored, and I would start kind of retreating and doing my everyday stuff, and start realizing that things like making music, which I do a ton of in my free time, really don't have the same weight as they used to. Because if I can think of a song in my head, that's as far as it's ever going to go.
Right.
And so I would stop creating, because I would stop creating, and I would probably end up turning very inwardly, realizing that the only person left to please was myself. And I'm guessing, I would probably still maintain certain hygienic habits. I'd want to keep my teeth. I'd want to stay clean just because
you don't want to end up like Deliverance, is what you're saying.
Exactly. But then I might, forget certain things. I wouldn't worry about my clothes matching or being on.
Or being on, yeah.
And I would, I would probably sleep anywhere I fucking wanted to.
Yeah.
If I got tired, I'd go into the nearest apartment and sleep on that bed.
Yeah.
It would be very sad, and I would probably...
it's odd that you think about that as sad, because, and I'm right there with you on that, but a lot of people think about this as paradise. They don't have to have responsibilities. They can live off of the planet. They can do whatever they want. That's a really sad scenario for me, too, because, again, why do you create? Would you still even create? I mean, that's probably the most interesting question when you're faced with that, is how long do you keep making things before you realize you have no audience? There's no point to that.
Essentially, I mean, if you and I were the last two people on Earth, I know we would still be doing this fucking show.
Yeah, probably.
And it would take 2 or 3 years, and we would do it in advance.
Yeah.
But it would take 2 or 3 years for us to realize,
no one's
listening.
Right.
Not even Rob Zombie anymore.
Rob Zombie hasn't opened his iTunes in years. This is it's a weird experiment for me, because I sort of already did this. I lived in Normal, Illinois, which was basically, I was the last man on Earth. There is nothing down there.
At least the last sober man.
Oh my God, it's so true. Or, it was a college town, although I wasn't going to college there. Again, don't ask me what the fuck I was doing there, because I have no answer for you. But when people would leave and go back to their so-called homes, they're away from the college town, they wouldn't even plow the streets. So you're snowed in, you're the last person there. And I found the hygienic stuff, you would always think that maybe your hygiene would go or whatever. But I was still wearing 3-piece suits, and I wasn't really getting up every day because I wasn't sleeping. But, getting off the floor from my blackouts. And it was probably just as depressing as you're talking about being in this film. But when I came to the city, instantly we start doing this show, not even thinking about if there's an audience for that or not. You want to talk about thought experiments, and that's something we've never, hit on in the show. I'm going to tell people right now because we're probably going to forget or find something better to talk about in Deliverance. But what do you do if you're the last man on Earth? Doublefutureshow@gmail.com. All right, so we've done the popcorn stuff that the last man on Earth is begging us to do. To ask these questions like, what do you do if you're the last man on Earth? The reason people go to see a film like this, and of course for Vincent Price. But I think there are two really important and awesome things that the film does, specifically the film, but I guess the book a little bit. The first one is that you are presented the story of what happened in a jigsaw fashion. They explain a lot of what's going on in a series of flashbacks. That doesn't sound like anything special today. But when you're dealing with a movie from 1964, especially in this genre, that element of mystery is really, really uncommon. A lot of those movies were very straightforward, or they would, to look at the Romero stuff, they treat the what caused this as a misnomer. It's not something to think about. It's not the question the film is asking. In The Last Man on Earth, there's a question to be asked there, and they're going to slowly reveal that to you. You're going to kind of piece that together yourself. It's the very, very early example of a lot of these puzzle piece movies we talk about today, where you're kind of assembling things. I think about something, like Bright Falls we talked about way earlier in this year, where you, as you're going along, you're kind of trying to put the pieces together. I don't think you need to watch The Last Man on Earth over and over to understand it. I think you get a pretty clear message the first time through.
Right on.
But you do have that question from the very beginning, how did things get like this? And you're not spoon-fed that at all. The other thing, and this falls back a little bit more on the book, is that you are following, whether you know it or not, at the beginning at least, the antagonist of the story. I mean, that is the whole concept of I Am Legend, the title of the book. Vincent Price is the boogeyman to these other people. At first, you're just seeing the vampires in the film. So you think they are creatures, they're driven by their, they want to eat him, or they're cannibal vampires, I guess. They want to suck his blood, make him one of them, abolish all that's left of the old race of humanity.
Right.
But then you find, when Ruth shows up, that there are these other vampires who have been treating themselves. So they have found a way to kind of push this stuff off. And they are the, I don't want to use the cliche of the next step in human evolution,
right,
but you know what I mean. They're the new mankind.
Yeah.
Vincent Price is now the outsider, and he has been going along. I mean, he's the villain. He is, that's what I Am Legend is all about, is to look at the very end of this. He is the legendary creature who is out there slaughtering us. You know what I mean?
Right.
He is, he's going around left and right, just killing off vampires, and you don't even think about it because they're the monsters of the movie. But when he is the last person on Earth, he becomes the monster. They are the normal people, and he is just going around mindlessly slaughtering these poor creatures for, I mean, part of it is as protection, but he's not going to hesitate ever to just kill one of these people off. That's what makes the stuff with Ruth so suspenseful, as he starts to realize who and what she is. That's the first thing that comes to mind is, well, I guess I have to kill her because I kill everything that isn't like myself. There's something that's almost a bit of dark humor, although it's probably unintentional, about calling the movie The Last Man on Earth. In the book, that's the titular line is the title of the book, is I Am Legend. It's this realization at the end of what he's become, what the world has become around him.
Right.
Here with Vincent Price, he just says, I am the last man on Earth. He's in denial.
Yeah.
He doesn't get what the protagonist, the antagonist maybe, from the book understands. And I like that bit of the movie separating itself from the book, although keeping the exact same message. It's just that Vincent Price's character does not come to the understanding. He goes to the grave thinking, I am still the end-all, be-all. I am the fucking alpha and omega, man. And now I'm dying, and that's a sad day for planet Earth. When really, they're wiping out the thing that is creating mass genocide, you know?
Well, they're wasting the runt, is really what they're doing. You have to think of it in the terms of, I guess, populace, right? Mm-hmm. You have this mass of people. You have 7 billion people who are all changed. Everybody's been affected by this disease. You know, everybody's kind of taken on this new step in, you could say evolution, you could just call it a disease. It really doesn't matter in that sense.
Right.
What does matter is that Vincent Price is now, he's the outcast. He's the runt. I mean, he's the short-necked giraffe.
Yeah.
He's the leftover.
Yeah. He's the last one.
From the
last generation.
And now he's going around saying, well, I may be the last one, but that's because the other 7 billion people on this earth have all gotten worse than me, and I am still the greatest. And that's such a fucking human thing to think.
Yeah, it's very egotistical.
I
center of the
believe,
universe, you know.
Exactly. I believe that if people aren't like me, they are worse off than me.
But to come back around to the movie understanding, that's such an important thing for me, that the movie doesn't fuck with that basic principle of the book, even in changing, you know, what happens. Something that I feel fell short in the other versions. But the very last thing you see is Ruth at the end of the movie, and with the crying baby, and she's basically telling the baby, don't cry, everything is okay now. Just one last little thing to show that the movie knows, here are the real heroes of the story, this collective group of people that, I mean, you know, Vincent Price is out there fighting for a cure or whatever, but these are the people who actually found the cure. They found, I mean, not a cure, but a way to push off this frenzy that so many other people have fallen prey to, and they're the survivors. They are the ones who fucking made it. And now that the one man who's been going around slaughtering them is out of the way, everything is going to be all right. The film wants you to know that it knows that, even though it chose to do something different with its protagonist. Chose to not give him that realization, which, why should he? Fuck him.
Okay, so fuck him. And I guess let's move on to a different type of fucking him, which we'll call Deliverance.
That is the least tactful segue you have ever made on this show.
But
you might as well hit the mainstream stuff while you're just...
So Deliverance for people is 2 scenes. And one is the early scene in the film, and one that you really dug.
Yeah, it's a great scene.
Which is the dueling banjos thing. All anybody knows about Deliverance is the banjos and the rape.
So we got our spoilers out of the way right now, too.
Exactly.
You need to know banjos and rape, essentially.
So the film opens with these 4 characters. They're going to take a canoe trip on the river, and they show up in nowhere, Georgia, essentially. And
Can we call it normal Georgia?
So they show up in normal Georgia.
Excellent.
And they get their cars driven down to the end of the river for this canoe trip. And while they're there, one of the characters, Drew, plays his guitar with this little banjo kid.
Right.
And
Feuding banjos is what it's credited as. Apparently it was a piece before it was popularized by the film.
Right. And so there's this weird scene where they're kind of playing this duet. And it's really the last fun thing that happens to these. They kind of have fun the first time they take on the rapids, but it's this like bittersweet, we almost died fun.
Right.
This is the last bit
adrenaline junkie fun.
This is the last bit of joy that these characters feel in the whole film. This banjo kid, as a side note, Tim Burton actually used him in Big Fish.
Oh, did he?
As one of the extras. He loved this kid so much from Deliverance that he was like, well, I need to find this guy's agent. Of course, the kid lives in Appalachia, has no agent.
Right.
So he goes and basically, internet and uses the power of the search engine and finds out that this guy is now, in his 30s. Teaching high school.
Sure.
And so he goes to Appalachia, gets this guy, and he plays one of the weird townspeople toward the end of Big Fish. But that's essentially what happened to that kid, is he went on to be a teacher.
Yeah, I think an analysis of the dueling banjo scene would be the point at which Double Feature jumps the shark.
Right.
Right, I mean, you can't, but we do have to talk about it a little bit, because it is such a solid scene. I mean, it's your introduction to the setting. So you have no idea what's going on, and you know that, like you said, this is a happy moment, but there's something really fucked up about what's going on, too. I mean, they're playing back and forth. You just have to see the fucking scene. If you're one of these people who refuses to watch the movies, but you listen to the show anyways, Google the YouTube, is that what people use? YouTube, the dueling banjo scene. So there's some kind of unspoken connection between Drew and this kid. Drew thinks the character, I mean, after they're done playing together, after they have that kind of, the sort of harmony you see all the time in jazz, what that's built around. He thinks they have some connection. They know each other now. And he tries to go back over and have some more fun with the kid. And the kid stonewalls him. Doesn't even look at him, acknowledge him, nothing. And later that'll come up again when they're actually in the canoes and they see the kid on the bridge. And poor fucking Drew is right there with the paddle trying to mimic the banjo. He's air banjoing on his
He's kind of
canoe
going,
paddle.
hey, remember me? I was the guy that was doing this last time you saw me.
Again, kid does not give a shit at all. So it's great as a scene because of that piece of music and the relationship between those two characters, but it's also good at establishing the point where you think you have almost a false sense of trust. Hey, we're on what's essentially vacation. We're having a good time. I'm making friends with the locals. And then to know that, oh, you thought we had let you into our little community here. No, not at all.
So the other big iconic scene is the big rape scene, the squeal like a piggy scene, where Ned Beatty gets his ass raped by the Mountain Man.
So is this the same South Park, they're raping him Indiana Jones scene?
I don't know. I mean,
think
I'm
that's
sure
part
they're
of that
mimicking
scene,
it.
right?
They've got to be mimicking
Okay.
it. I mean, these two scenes get mimicked more than most of what I've seen in film.
Yeah.
So there's this rape scene where Bobby and Ed come on shore. They're taking a break, waiting for the other two guys to catch up to them. Essentially, two mountain men come down from the hills and they fuck Bobby up the ass.
Right.
And then they're gonna make Ed suck their dick.
Right.
I mean, that's what happens. That's what goes on in this scene. It's really graphic and it's very uncomfortable. And there's this whole pig metaphor that's going on the whole time the one guy's raping Bobby.
Sure. It's incredibly awkward.
And you kind of get this feeling like, uh-oh, this is going to be a movie where the mountain people come out and they fuck with these people. You think that the film is going to have this turn where, oh, here come the mountain men.
It becomes a horror film.
Exactly. Yeah. But instead, Lewis shows up, uses his bow, kills the guy, and the film is just, from then on, this grappling with what do you do after you've murdered somebody? How far does it go? How far do you let it go? And that's what I really like about the film, is it has this option to turn into a thriller, action, horror.
The Hills Have Eyes, right?
Exactly.
It's either The Hills Have Eyes or it stays in the genre it's been up to this point, which is sort of a suspense drama kind of film. You know, the other thing I like about that scene, I mean, it's really more awkward and uncomfortable than we could ever describe on the show. Thinking back to it, it's the reason people remember that from the movie. You can't fucking forget a scene like that. But then Lewis shoots him with an arrow. I mean, if we were dealing with firearms here, if we were dealing with guns, and he shot him, that would be one thing. The scene is over. That's sort of us escaping from that awful moment. But he shoots him with an arrow, and the nature of shooting someone with an arrow is that it's an uncomfortable, prolonged death.
Yeah.
They have this moment where the one guy has fled. They're probably safe from the one guy for now. But the other man has an arrow in him, and the minute that guy is still... He's only alive for another 60 seconds of the film or so. And not long enough to do anything but gasp a little bit and kind of stumble around. But that feels like an hour.
Yeah.
You don't know what he's going to do, if he still has time to attack, if maybe he's going to bestow some kind of knowledge on us before he departs. You know, you can even see that from the point of view of the characters. He leans down on that tree, essentially to die, and the characters are even afraid to approach him. I think it's Bobby that kind of even recoils a little bit when he realizes that he's still breathing. It's just an uncomfortable way to end an already ridiculously uncomfortable scene.
And then you get, right after that, you get this scene where they start trying to figure out how they're going to treat the murder, because they've killed somebody. It's a murder.
What do you do at this point?
Even if it's in self-defense, at this point, Lewis is convinced that despite the fact that it's self-defense, being judged by a jury of these guys' peers is being judged by their family.
Right.
He's got this mountain man, everybody's fucking their cousin mentality. Sure. And it's a good point. At least he makes it seem like a good point.
Right.
And he kind of starts going, you know, who makes the laws when there is no laws? And,
right.
And we're out here, we need to make our own decisions. The law doesn't extend to where we are. And he kind of boils it down to, when you're out in the fucking middle of nowhere, the one who makes the laws is the one with the biggest stick.
Yeah, right.
And throughout the film, Lewis has the biggest stick. This is the guy who tells everybody, you know, we're going to the river. He comes up with the idea, right?
Yeah.
He says, they're flooding the river. I want to see this majesty.
Sure.
He has all these weird...
He's the leader of the pack.
Exactly.
Which is why it's so uncomfortable when he falls.
Yeah. He has all these weird kind of separate diatribes where he's talking about machines and the system are going to fail and it's going to be a survival. It's going to be all about survival. And you buy into him. He's the guy. He's the man. I mean, okay, so he's fucking Burt Reynolds, and he's Burt Reynolds before the mustache.
Yes.
So he's still packing.
He's got the power.
He's packing his acting chops, and he's not relying on the mustache.
Before he let the mustache do the acting for him. I don't want to derail you too much, but can we talk about the system a little bit? Because this was an interesting idea that they brought up. I only really want to dwell on it here because it's something we struggled to talk about when we did the McVeigh tapes. When we talked about that was a documentary. It's a little out of the scope of what we're even talking about here. But there was something specific we hit on in there in trying to figure out what happened mentally with Timothy McVeigh. And he was part of what we called a survivalist movement, which is different than a survivalism movement, which is Nine Inch Nails and awesome. But the survivalist movement is concerned more with what happens, in the situation we're talking about with The Last Man on Earth, when you are out in the woods, a situation that isn't very realistic because you wouldn't be out in the woods. But when there's no hope anywhere else, the cities have crumbled, you're out in the woods and you have, a canteen and some matchsticks. How do you survive? It's about being one with nature versus the system, which is something I've always considered to be, they're talking about in the movie the struggle of what was against the struggle of what will be. You can almost read that into, as a metaphor of what's going to happen in the film. But they're talking about back when things were simpler, before we fell out of touch. And an idea I don't buy into at all, of course, because I live in a modern fucking city. But it's an idea of what was versus all of this technology and what will be. I always think of that as what was versus what is, people being stuck in, the old ways. But I thought that was interesting to look at these four characters as trying to get back in touch with nature, and that disconnect between nature mountain world and modern civilization being the crux of their problem, really. Right. If they were tried by a jury of their peers, they wouldn't really have a problem, or they would feel better about it. But they don't think they'd be tried by that jury. They think they would be tried by a jury of mountain man peers, who, even if they aren't literally all part of the same family, they are figuratively all part of the same family. Part
of the same culture. I mean, it is a culture.
These four are the outsiders in this scenario.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because there's this weird scene, I don't know if you remember it, but there's this scene where when Lewis goes wandering off in the woods because he heard something, and Drew kind of says, he wants to be one with nature, but he can't hack it. He's still a city boy at heart.
Sure.
And that's kind of where you start to realize that Lewis might not know what the fuck he's doing.
Yeah.
It's the first time you really start to question it. So the last thing that Lewis ever does, Lewis gets one badass moment, and it's killing the mountain man. Other than that, he's a one-time use guy.
Right.
He comes in as this badass, otherwise he's got a loud mouth and a lot to say.
Sure.
But the last thing Lewis does before he bows out, right? He gets them into the middle of it, and then he gets hurt and he bows out. The last thing he does is says that Drew was shot and that he saw the guy that shot him.
Yeah.
That's the first step in the wrong direction. And it's just because these guys are scared, they're filling in blanks.
Sure.
I mean, okay, so how do you feel about the Drew thing? There's a lot of speculation as to whether or not he was shot by the man on the mountain, who may have been the guy with no teeth.
Yeah, right.
Or maybe he killed himself because he was the only guilty one.
Yeah.
He was the only one that actually felt bad about the murder, and maybe he bailed out of the boat. They don't necessarily find a bullet wound. A lot of what I like about this film is that they don't answer the questions that they're raising.
Yeah. Well, if they answered the question, it would diminish the overall impact. They want you to struggle with this just as much as these guys are struggling with these questions. Almost more so to give you that additional sense of realism. Because you can't be there in the mountains with these guys.
Sure.
So when these guys have come to terms and they've collectively agreed, well, he must have been shot, the movie still wants to leave you with the lingering feeling of, oh, hold on, I don't know if I'm...
Did you see him get shot?
Yeah, exactly.
But the thing is Lewis says he got shot, and immediately you go, oh, I must not have seen that.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you'll remember when we were watching the movie this time, and I was like watching the scene going, does he get shot?
Right.
I didn't see it, but he kind of moves like he could have. Magic bullet,
Yeah. There's a, well, what we know about the magic bullet on this show is that it doesn't fucking exist. See Rebecca Watson. But that's just one of these points in the movie. I mean, I couldn't help but talk to you about this as it was going on, because part of it is my fear of preparation for this show. To go, wait, hold on. Are we, maybe I didn't catch something. There's another moment in the film where they're identifying the guy's body and trying to figure out if that was him or not. And I had to kind of stop and go, well, it seems like they've decided it's him, but I don't know if I've decided that. So with that point with Drew is really interesting. And really bizarre. It's very momentary. If they had lingered there longer, it would venture into almost David Lynch kind of territory. That insane scene we see with the yellow man from the end of Blue Velvet. I mean, that kind of stuff. They're on the canoe and everything's going fine. Drew is not responding. He won't put his life jacket on. And then it's almost like he twitches a little odd. I mean, he's robotic for a little bit. He doesn't move at all.
And you keep seeing Lewis look up onto the ridge.
Yeah, right. And so then he twitches a bit, and kind of just jumps out of the boat. I mean, falls out of the boat, stumbles out of the boat.
It's hard to say.
Yeah. So you could say that in the moments he's not moving, he is mentally trying to come to, because he's the oddball out in this scenario.
Right.
Everyone else kind of says, all right, survival instinct is kicking in more than just the way it does in the woods, but in a, we're going to get caught and fucking executed. They all want to bury him.
Well,
and Drew's the only man to dissent.
Well, and Drew's the only one that, the other two were victims, and Lewis killed a guy.
Right.
Drew is the fourth guy who just, he was there and he just chased a guy with a paddle. I mean, what's wrong with that?
So you're not going to turn against Lewis because he was the one who, I mean, he saved the day, but it's also his fucking problem. He killed the guy.
Yeah.
And then there's the other two who were just basically raped or, threatened with it, one of them. But I mean, they were in a very dire situation. You don't ever want to disagree with the victims. The victims are never wrong.
Right.
Anytime there's a tragedy like that, you can put all of your great ideas aside. The victims, man. I mean, you can't go against what they're saying. So that's a hard spot, and I don't know. I get the feeling, at the time I said, all right, he jumps. He couldn't deal with it. He was just like, fuck this. I don't want to go against everybody else. I know what they're going to do. There's no stopping them, and I refuse to live with that. But then as I start to replay that scene in my mind, I go, it looks like he was shot. He wasn't moving for a while. Maybe he fell out of the boat, so I really don't know.
I would say that he jumped, but again, you can't tell, and the film doesn't tell you.
Not at all.
Love that. So now
later they come back and go, is that a bullet hole? What's going on over there? And they still don't know.
So now Lewis's leg is broken, which means that it's now up to Ed to finish the film. Really.
Right.
We change sites to John Voight.
Yeah.
And he finishes the whole movie. He becomes the guy, and it's interesting because he's got more of a real world kind of implication based background.
This is a hobby for him, not a lifestyle like it is with Lewis.
And so the first thing that he has to do is climb the mountain and kill the shooter, if there is a shooter at all.
Right.
So the mountain scene is really confusing. There's a lot of weird stuff that happens on top of the mountain. For some reason, Ed gets an arrow in him, and we're going to touch on that. But I think the most confusing thing is, why does Ed's face get eaten by the sky? And you, Mr. Eric Ingram, are the man to ask.
So it's weird that we're watching this together. Thank God we have already touched on this, so I can just reference it. I'm glad we've built up such a library I can now do this. See 28 Weeks Later. Not the film. I mean, see that too. But see our discussion on that. We talked about Day for Night. This is, I guess, an early 70s version of Day for Night.
1972, yeah.
Yeah, where they color out the sky. Now, this looks fine when they're looking down at him. It's only when they look up at the sky that you can tell someone just took a purple marker and drew. I mean, that's almost literally what they're probably doing here, is going over the actual reels and coloring them. I guess, I don't know enough about the specific process they're using to talk. I'm sure if they were literally doing it by hand, it would look like Dr. Katz. It would look like squiggle vision. So I'm sure that's not what it is. But they're using a kind of filter over it, and occasionally Ed will move his head over the filter, and it will eat away part of his face, which is a little disturbing, but maybe not in the way the movie was talking about.
Okay, so after Ed's face is terrorized all night by the sky, he wakes up and there's a man with a gun. Okay, so first point of interest, it's not the same gun as the man on the ground.
Interesting.
The man on the ground had a double-barreled shotgun. This is a single-fire shotgun.
Right.
And he's not wearing a hat, and he has all his teeth. But Ed draws a bead on him from far away. He can't tell. Sees a guy with a gun. He's scared. Everybody's scared at this point.
They're running away. They're in a horror movie,
is just
so they think.
trying to do what they can to survive. So he draws a bead on him with the arrow. We see the kind of hamster style, I can't shoot a deer thing, where he almost misses. And then the guy lumbers over to him. You
know this from the same thing with firearms. If you hold a gun out for a prolonged period of time, it's like that scene we saw way back in The Punisher, where he puts the weight in the man's hand. Clearly you can hold up a weight, but the longer you hold it there, the more it wears on your muscles. So maybe if he would just fire off his shots a little earlier.
Yeah.
But I don't know why I'm giving him archery advice. That's the most ludicrous thing that's ever happened on the show. Please continue.
Maybe because he falls on his own fucking arrow.
All right, so maybe he does need some advice.
So
right?
The bow, the compound bow that they're using throughout the film, has arrows mounted on the side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And Ed falls down on one of them. That's where that arrow comes from. It's not the one he shot. There's not a loose magic arrow, a JFK-style second arrow. Bullshit.
Yeah, thank you.
And so the guy comes lumbering over, shot by Ed, and he starts to shoot at him, and he falls over and dies.
Right.
So the reason that he points the gun at Ed may, one, be because he's the man in question, or two, because Ed has a fucking arrow pointed at the guy.
Most likely. I mean, reverse engineer that a bit. you're walking through the forest and someone points an arrow at your skull, my first reaction would be to panic. But I guess if I'm a mountain man and I have a shotgun, I'm clearly prepared for a scenario like this. You just point your gun right back him. I mean, that's what you have to do. So that doesn't actually give us any clues.
Right.
At that moment in the film, I'm curious how you felt about this, but my first time going through and watching it, I immediately go, well, that's the guy. He's got a gun. He's wandering around.
Yeah.
Shoot him. Shoot him with
Yeah.
not for a second do I think, whoa, wait a second. You're just shooting somebody from far away.
Right.
With, I mean, are you following these guys around the first time you're watching it? You're going to
When he shoots the guy, I go, yes, you got him.
Yeah,
and
right.
then he looks at him and I go, oh my God, I didn't realize there are other people on the planet.
Yeah.
You could have just killed an innocent man. Another question they never really answer.
Yeah.
There's clues that kind of fill in both sides of the story. There's a missing man. There's a missing brother from Aintree who went out hunting. But also the guy's got, false teeth. So it could go either way. Another one of those things about the film that I love that they don't touch on.
Right, because you don't want to make your viewer comfortable with it. You don't want to say, phew, it's over, guys. It turns out it was the guy and we're justified in, doing what we did out there. Instead, it's just another fucking situation that, I mean, that's something that really weighs heavy on Ed throughout the rest of the film. When they finally get back home, Bobby's relieved to be sitting down at the table.
Sure.
But Ed still hasn't gotten it out. He has a fucking breakdown because now there is, Bobby was just escaping a situation. Ed might have killed an innocent man. Probably, I think if I had to make a guess, probably killed an innocent man. That would be bad enough if you did it in a sort of self-defense. But now you don't even know if it's the guy.
And the thing that I love about the dinner scene, now that you brought that up, is it makes this point that it seems like the film is driving toward, and then it pulls away at this dinner scene.
Yeah.
And the film starts, you get the weird banjo kid, you get the weird gas station dancing guy, you get the mountain man, you get the hunter, you get all these weird characters. And it seems like the film is going, when you're out in the middle of nowhere, no one is your friend.
Yeah.
But what it really goes to say is, keep your fucking wits about you. Southern people aren't evil.
Yeah, right.
You're at the table and the woman's talking about, oh, I've got this really big cucumber. And you're like, wait, these are just normal human beings.
Yeah, right.
Southern people aren't all evil butt fucking monsters.
Yeah, right.
There's one bad guy in the whole film.
And an accomplice, I guess.
Except for Lewis, Ed, and Bobby.
Yeah.
Those are the real bad guys throughout the movie. Just like fucking The Last Man on Earth.
Yeah.
You're following these antagonists that show up in somebody else's neighborhood, fuck shit up, and then they hide it from the other people.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, it's not the town they're fighting against. It's these two specific guys who did something wrong. Now, I wouldn't, blame the four protagonists. They didn't ask for this. They're just in, outside territory. There's nothing wrong with coming and visiting a town. You don't get free reign to just rape any of your tourists. Can you imagine what the Loop would look like if that were the case? But at the same time, the mentality of them after this event occurs is that they're fighting off the town. That any hillbilly they see, they need to just mow through them and get the fuck out of here. And that's not the case. I mean, that really comes home for me when you see the sheriff at the end, and he's a really clean guy. He's over there, at the edge, talking to all these other guys missing their teeth and looking really scraggly. But he himself is the lawman, the one they would have ended up coming to, if they
were playing it by the books, if they didn't
if they
decide
did the right
there
thing.
was no law.
Yeah.
Lewis tells them there's no law where we are.
And that just becomes the law at that point. So they would have ended up going to the sheriff, telling him their story, and he looks like a clean, normal person, not like the type of people that they're worried the entire town is composed of.
He seems like a reasonable man of the law who would have totally and unbiasedly believed them had they just killed the man in self-defense and finished their trip down the fucking river.
This is all starting to remind me of the invention of lying, back when we talked about that. This is playing out the opposite side of that in a real-world scenario rather than a sci-fi one. Just don't fucking lie when you murder people. Just don't do it.
Well, don't murder people, number one. And number two, don't lie about murdering people.
Don't kill, and if you kill, don't lie about it. And I think that's a good start. We'll begin there. We have a website, which I referenced earlier. You can still get that Audible thing. It's bookshow.doublefeatureshow.com. If you just want to go to the website.
Well.
Is there a deliverance book? I was not aware of that. So look for both of those on there. And we have the website, of course, too, doublefeatureshow.com. An email address, doublefeatureshow@gmail.com. Previously, I asked people if they were the last man on Earth, what would they do? We've raised a lot of questions in Deliverance, so I would love to hear people's thoughts about that too. So send us some of that. The two things I completely neglected to mention. One is Ann Teller. I don't know how we talked about The Last Man on Earth and never mentioned Ann Teller, but it's ANDTELLER, as in Penn Ann Teller. It's something Teller made for one of the Romero DVDs, and it's just really fucking great. So look that up. It's going to be hard to Google, but try and look it up anyways. Ampersand Teller. The other thing I have to mention is Mike T. So Mike, and actually a lot of people who were less of a crybaby than Mike, all donated to the show. We had a donation from Steve and from Ty and from, Andrea and Nathan. These guys all donated, so thank you. We're in a spot right now where we could really goddamn use it. We're moving out of the temporary place we've been recording, and we're gonna try and lock down another year of recording space. So this is pretty much the optimum time for when the show is costing us money to produce. But Mike was a little upset that we didn't mention him on the Rob Zombie show, which we just did. I don't think you should be that upset. It's a Rob Zombie show. Yeah, that means our producer listened to it and Rob Zombie, and that's probably it. So now everyone heard your name, Mike. I hope this makes up for it. We're keeping track of the names of all the people who donated, and at the end of the year, we're going to pick out two. They both pick a movie, and we're going to make a double feature out of it. It's going to be a listener-chosen episode of Double Feature. So you can send a donation by going to donate.doublefeatureshow.com. And if you sign up for the subscription on there, in addition to entering for that, you'll be able to record a vocal sample that we'll use for a special version of the intro, probably the intro of that episode of Double Feature. So all that's donate.doublefeatureshow.com. In the meantime, we got two more movies.
Yeah, we're going to cover Die Hard, which is another film where the score kind of permeates through the entire film.
Wow, yeah, that's another. Yeah, we got the dueling banjos all throughout Deliverance, and now we'll be getting, I think it's Ode to Joy. Yeah. That's all throughout Die Hard. What are we doing that with?
Die Hard and Man on Wire.
All right, that's going to be a cool one, too. I really like the Man on Wire documentary.
Yeah, tall buildings.
It'll be a lot less awkward than when we did the McVeigh tapes and had to kind of just stick those movies together to talk about tragedy. We could talk about some really great stuff on the show next time, so look forward to that. Actually watch those movies this time. I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, watch more fucking film.
Bye. We can call it a Dario Argento episode, but we talked about phenomena. We talked about creepers. And, a lot of that Italian stuff was completely dubbed. They didn't even record sound, at the time that they did it. But I guess we should shift into that zombie thing, because it's not zombies, it's vampires.
Right.
But at the same time, it's not vampires, it's zombies. I mean, what's going on there?
Apparently, I guess it's a virus, so chalk one up for zombies.
Okay.
And the virus has spread to everybody through people being bitten, chalk two up to zombies. Yeah. And essentially, they bite you and suck your blood. That's one for vampires. But then there's a way to treat it so that you can become normal again. So I guess it's 2 for vampires and 2 for zombies.
All right. So we're at a head here. However, we know that the movie was made in 1964.
Oh, so that was before Mr. Romero kind of took his swing.
Now, I know this is going to appeal to your contrarian streak here. This was done before Night of the Living Dead. And the book, even before that, obviously. But a lot of people credit the original I Am Legend story as beginning the disease apocalypse. That's the crucial moment in looking back and seeing how we got today's zombies, or how we even got the Romero stuff.
Right.
Romero has famously come out and said, yeah, I think he uses the word steal when he talks about it. I stole the story from this little known thing called I Am Legend. And that's what I based Night of the Living Dead off of.
Films is that apparently either filmmakers don't have any original ideas, or studios don't want to see original ideas. Yeah. They want to see adaptations of books, and they want to see them 3 times, apparently.
It just seems like the job's already part of the way done for you. I mean, if you're going to do a movie, you have to write it down anyway, so why not just go to the book? And clearly there might be something there. But we do have to talk about the Richard Matheson book a little bit. He wrote part of The Last Man on Earth. He wrote part of the screenplay, and apparently, this is really funny to me, now here in the future, not back in the 60s. He was so unhappy with the final product that he took his name off it, so they credit Logan Swanson. He's sort of taking the Alan Smithy approach that we saw, what was that, back in Hellraiser?
Right, the fourth one, I think.
Of, just totally removing your name. Although, to my knowledge, Logan Swanson is not. Maybe that's the writer side of Alan Smithy, I don't know. But what's funny about that is that this movie had two other chances. It was remade as The Omega Man, and then it was also made as I Am Legend.
Which is the title of the book.
Yes. And then there was a direct-to-DVD thing. I think it was called I Am the Omega Man, or I Am Omega is what it was called, which I haven't seen, but I've seen the other two, and I think this is probably as good as it gets. I don't know that you can do better justice for... I think this is the closest adaptation, and probably the least offensive one. I mean, both of those other movies kind of shoot themselves in the foot with at least one other thing that they do. I guess I don't want to spoil the weird thing that each of the movies does. But, you can check out the book. We have that Audible thing.
Right.
It's bookshow.doublefeatureshow.com, and you can just grab the audiobook of that, and then everyone will be happy.
You can basically judge the film based on your knowledge of the book, which a lot of people seem to like to do. Also, fuck you if you do that.
Yeah, right. I'm going to base the movie on my knowledge of Vincent Price, and that will just make me happy. So through that URL, we have a thing where you can get the book for free, but most people have to pay for the book. What you don't have to pay for is the film. I think this is the second time we've ever done this, but this is a film that's in the public domain. Right. The last time we did that was probably that William Castle movie we did all the way back with Clue.
Oh, yeah, when we did that.
House on Haunted Hill.
That was another Vincent Price, too.
Yeah, it was. Maybe just Vincent Price movies are, I guess it's about that time, right?
I guess
all the
so.
Vincent Price stuff just starts slipping into the public domain. This is also probably the second Italian, I'm going to use air quotes here because I know you'll scoff at this, Italian horror movie. Come on, it's the 60s. It's kind of a horror film.
I wouldn't even say
There's
that
zombies.
I Am Legend is a horror. It's not zombies.
But all right, so Italian horror, let's call it a piece of Italian cinema.
Sure.
As we talked about way back on the Dario Argento, I should...
Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
My name is Eric. Of course, I'm here with Michael.
Oh, hey.
And this is double feature, so we have two movies that are going to be on the show today.
We have a pair of features. We're going to do The Last Man on Earth and Deliverance.
So it's kind of an isolation thing going on here today. Here in Chicago, we don't feel isolation a whole lot. Some of our listeners who may live off in, say, the mountains or the woods.
So this is for you. This is about you.
Yeah, this is our show about those people. We're going to spoil both of these films. So The Last Man on Earth, everyone has seen this movie, even if they haven't seen this movie, because there's also The Omega Man, and then there's that thing that Will Smith did as well. Deliverance, I don't know. I haven't seen Deliverance. I hadn't seen Deliverance.
Deliverance, it's kind of culty. I mean, it was popular when it came out in the 70s. The trickle down from the 70s to our generation has kind of been nauseatingly low. I don't think a whole lot of people have seen it since it coming out, aside from the people that are going out to look for, the iconic stuff that you see parodied all the time. Yeah,
usually you're a good gauge for if something has cult appeal, but when we're talking about the 70s, I have a feeling that 70s stuff more than the average person does. So that might be a little unfair.
Right.
Either way, we're going to spoil Deliverance, and goddamn are there spoilers in it. I would say that you're probably safe to listen to The Last Man on Earth, even if you haven't seen it, because, whatever. We're going to tell you about pretty much the one cool thing that it really does. And Deliverance, that's going to be a lengthy discussion, and you should probably just watch that fucking movie first.
Yep.
If you don't want to get spoiled, you can use the chapters. They're in QuickTime, iTunes, and some other stuff. I got an email today, actually, from somebody who has a Zune who thinks we make fun of Zune owners on the show. I'm pretty sure we make fun of Zune as a platform.
Yeah, I don't care. Zune owners are probably fine people.
Yeah, they listen to our show, so they must be great people. Either way, you can look in the lyrics section of your Zune, or I still don't know if Zunes have lyric sections either. Or you can use the chapters in the chapters menu of the AAC version of the show, which is probably the one you have, and skip the movie you haven't seen or don't want to hear us talk about. So first up is The Last Man on Earth, the Vincent Price 1964 Last Man on Earth. And so this is based on a book. This just seems to keep happening on our show where we run into the book movies.
The thing is that we do films.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate side effect of